Please support these companies. They took the time to educate us during this conference. Welcome to the third annual virtual Aquaponic Cannabis Conference.
Yes, lots to juggle this morning. It's like some weird screen sharing error. Oh, there we go. This will work. Okay, I can make this work. All right, sorry about this, guys. Again, Zoom has been weird this morning. We've had a whole bunch of technical issues, but I think we got everything sorted. So today I'm going to talk about a bunch of advanced natural farming techniques that I've been working on. All the stuff, well, a large percentage of the stuff that we're going to talk about today was thanks to Chris Trump. We're going to kind of talk a little bit more in depth about IPMO, as well as super labs, plant labs, and how to better utilize mineralization in terms of isolating different plant and new mineral groups, and how to utilize things like open nutrient project and some of the other things that we've built as far as tools to make it easier for you to dial in nutrients in your grow at home. And I want to kind of teach you guys a couple of things that maybe will change the way you think about some of the different KNF inputs, and then also share with you guys a couple of the cool experimental stuff that we're working on, and kind of give you guys some how-tos on how you guys can experiment with some of that stuff at home. So the main point that we're going to talk about today is kind of how do you increase competitive exclusion in your garden, right? So I think a lot of times people don't really think about competitive exclusion in a way of protecting the garden, more it's like treating something or as a remedy and not so much as a preventative. And it's something that I think that people often need to kind of focus on more. I can't say this how many times, over and over again, but IMO, your indigenous microorganisms from KNF, is the best thing you can put in your garden. It helps the plants defend themselves. It helps eliminate a lot of those pathogens and bad fungi in the system, and also can really help with mineralization and things like aquaponics. You can pour that directly into your MBBRs. You can pour that directly into your system, and it helps with the mineralization and breaking down that fish waste and adding those microbials that you don't traditionally have in that food web, in aquaponics, or ones that are just missing because you don't have a fully natural environment that has all the different things to process things like phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur, and other things. So definitely something that you should check out. For those of you who don't know who I am, I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Stephen Reisner. I'm the organizer of this conference. I'm also the owner and operator of Ponics. I have a whole consulting business. I'm currently living in Thailand. We have a large operation that we're setting up here. We have 4 very large greenhouses that'll all be set up as flowering aquaponic facilities using a SIPS type system. It's kind of a hybrid living soil aquaponics facility. You could check out more about that on my YouTube channel over on Ponics. We have a ton of video content on there, or on my Instagram. We also have a podcast called Growing with Fishes. We'll talk about that later. But I guess that's the quick and dirty of who I am. If you want to know more, check out more of the content on whatever platform that you're listening to or viewing this on. I have hundreds of other hours up if you're into educational content. All right. So think about your microbes the same way you think about Mulder's chart, right? You need to have everything in the right ratios, and you don't want to have anything over dominant. I think a lot of times people kind of go crazy with trichoderma and lactobacillus and don't realize that they're creating an imbalance in their system, be it aquaponics or with soil systems. In aquaponics, it's a little less of a disaster when it comes to over domination, but in soil systems, it can definitely be a huge problem if you have way too much of one or the other. So think about them and the different soil groups the same way that you think about Mulder's chart, and I think you'll have a much better outcome and a better view about how you have to go about managing your microbials. I think it's something that, again, that isn't kind of emphasized enough. People kind of talk about it in a different way, and I think it's an easy translation if you're used to understanding how Mulder's chart works. So one of the other things that we've had a lot of good luck with the last couple of years is blending different strains of the same microbial controls. So for instance, blending Bioseries with Velifer and Botanigard, or blending Velifer and Botanigard. Both of them are very Bassiana strains, but when you blend them and brew them for 12 hours before application, you can actually create some hybrid strains that have a little bit better virulence. We've noticed a much better infection rate for things like leaf hoppers and some of the other harder to treat insects by blending some of the different strains of Eisaria fumiceraceae as well as Bavaria bassiana, and mixing those together. Not so much the Eisaria with the Bavaria, but mixing the different strains of the same species in order to get a more virulent a particular infection rate. And this came into play when we were in Georgia. We had a bunch of leaf hoppers that were kind of immune to everything. And as soon as we started doing some of the blends, the different Bavaria bassianas, boom, immediately started getting really good results with infections on those leaf hoppers. So definitely something to think about, and something that can kind of give you an additional weapon in your toolbox when it comes to your IPM. You already have a couple of these products. You can kind of add if you have 3 of these, well, you can run all 3 individually. Then you can do a blend of them as your 4th in your rotation as like an extra, IPM to your regimen. One of the other cool things that you're starting to see, and I don't know if this is hitting this stuff in the US, but here in Thailand, we can actually buy Metarhizium mixed with Bavaria bassiana. And that gives us a really wide ranging pest control option. And I know there's more and more of these different blended products starting to come out on the market. And it's also another great way to get a better efficacy out of your biocontrols. Just be mindful that stuff like this, especially this particular product, will leave a little bit of a residue on the leaf. And if you don't know what you're looking at, you can think you're looking at powdery mildew. I know I certainly thought it was the first day after application, and then I realized it was just the little water droplets from that. And the next day when we had a good mist come through, all of it was gone. So yeah, definitely a good product. And I will say Eisaria fumiceraceae is like completely impossible to find here in Thailand. I don't know why, but it definitely is hard to come by here. All right, so why would you use natural farming in your facility? Well, natural farming can lower your costs. It can greatly reduce fungal infections. I can't even imagine trying to grow here in Thailand with the high humidity and running aquaponics in high humidity without having properly designed greenhouses and airflow, but also having that good regimen of microbiology on the leaf surface. When we apply liquid IMO and things like labs and other biocontrols, Bacillus pumilus, Bacillus subtilis, Bavaria bassiana, et cetera, all of these things can survive on a leaf for quite a while and help defend the plant from things like insects or molds. Without using that and trying to fall back to some of the old traditional methods with spraying chemicals and all sorts of stuff, it's simply not going to work in a place that's as humid as here. If you have that natural defense force ready to help defend your plant at all times, that's what's going to get you the best results, especially in more extreme climates and more harder to manage climates. You can also treat a wide range of things that are really hard to treat. Things like septoria and other things can be reversed pretty quickly with treatments of lactobacillus and IMO. It's another great example of one that there isn't really a great go-to in the traditional treatment market, whereas with things like natural farming, you can crush it pretty easily. Mineralization and aquaponics, adding IMO to your mineralization tanks and your brew tanks and your compost tea tanks, all that kind of stuff, dramatically increases the mineralization rate, sometimes as much as 80% in some minerals in terms of total bioavailable ppm. So it really allows for you to get a lot more mineralization out of that same fish waste that you're already generating. So you can make the most of it and reduce the amount of supplementation that you do need to use in your system. You can also blend, small amounts of supplements depending on what it is to make them hyper bioavailable, which is another thing that you can do. As long as you don't make those mixes too hot, you won't burn those microbes. You can help, we talked about increased plant resistance and mineralization, as well as adding missing things. So yeah, adding in some of those missing mineralization microbes in the aquatic food web is another important point to things like IMO. So one of the topics we're going to talk about today is what is indigenous predatory microorganisms? So indigenous predatory microorganisms is a method that was introduced to me by Chris Trump. Chris Trump's a really good friend of mine. Thank you so much for Chris. He's helped kind of refine this as well. I know I've been working on it, and he's kind of had some insightful things. We're going to talk about some cool things that I've kind of stumbled upon here in Thailand, working with this method and trying to adapt it to the climate here. And then I worked with this again in Africa, in Zimbabwe, as well as Oklahoma. So IPMO is similar to IMO. The only difference is that we're going to replace 30% of the rice from an IMO collection with crickets or lobsters or crabs or any other type of chitinase or chitin heavy material, right? So but the ideal thing is locally collected insects. If you can get a little black light or a little lamp with a little bucket of water underneath of it to collect those bugs and dry them out, use them. Or here in Thailand, we can just go buy crickets at the market. You can go to your pet store and buy crickets at your pet shop and do the same thing. But the idea is to try ideally to get locally collected insects or even insects pests from your garden. I know when I was working in Georgia, we had a bunch of Japanese beetles, and they were able to do some collections with that worked very well. And take the Japanese beetles off of the plants that were starting to get mold, and then immediately use them for IMO collection. So, but basically the idea is that you're going to allow those same indigenous microorganisms to be collected onto your rice, but you're also collecting the ones that also prey upon those insects and exoskeletons and feed on the chitinase and those insects themselves. So you're going to kind of help gather the local fungi that will attack those insects in your local area. So you're not spraying anything that's not already there, not spraying anything that's foreign, you're not spraying anything that's not supposed to be there. You can kind of collect the local biology that naturally will kill these insects, concentrate it and weaponize it, and then use it back against the local insects in your population. Now, this helped me a lot when I was in Africa. When COVID broke out, they sealed the borders of Zimbabwe. So we couldn't import anything. So we kind of had to figure out how to deal with the grasshoppers. We had a lot of grasshoppers, like large grasshoppers in Zimbabwe. And I talked to Chris, and he's like, well, hey, we had this work really well for weevils and beetles. Why don't you give it a try for, for your grasshoppers? So we tried it. We basically had a couple of the local kids collect a bunch of the grasshoppers and crickets. And other bugs, we use that instead of the purchased ones like we do here in Thailand. I'll put that out, and then that really helped dramatically reduce the population to where we were only able to find a few per acre after about 2 weeks of application. So it knocked them down completely, and it also wasn't anything that, like, I don't have to worry about the kids running through the fields or the dogs or the runoff or anything like that. You can feel good about utilizing this type of pest control. So it does work really good against grasshoppers, beetles, weevils, leafhoppers, scale, wasps, bees. Just be careful, it will kill bees. We did manage to do that on one of the test runs that we did. So be mindful that if it's a plant that is being heavily pollinated, you might not want to use the IPMO on that one and maybe go with a different product. But this can work really well. It doesn't work particularly well on mites, but I am working on a couple of test methods for that. We don't have any mite problems, but pretty much everyone else in Thailand has spider mite issues. So we have plenty of guinea pigs that we can experiment with when it comes to testing some of these new ideas that we're working on. But we definitely have some ideas on some cool new stuff that we'll be sharing later this year when it comes down that path. But yeah. So this is your main ingredients here. So you're doing regular IMO collection. You're just replacing about 30% of the rice mass. So if I was doing a kilo of rice, I would replace 300 grams of that rice with 300 grams of crickets or lobster, or crab meal, or anything else that's chitinase containing, ideally. But crickets or whatever you can get your hands on. Insect frass is another one that you can utilize. So whatever is convenient for you and your local reach. And then you're going to, again, put that out, do your regular collection. Then you're going to cut that 50% with sugar so you can stabilize it, and then you can go ahead and brew that. So you can see here's the results of a little grub there that was a caterpillar that was feeding on the plants and got completely engulfed. So this is what we do here in Thailand. We go buy a couple kilos of crickets. People actually eat those as a, something to munch on here. They're not that bad. I like the silkworms better than the crickets, but the crickets aren't too bad. Kind of nutty flavored. But you take those, you mix them with your rice. This is all cooked rice with crickets. So you're going to take the rice and the crickets, mix it together. Then you're going to cook it the same way as you would as IMO till it's al dente, as Chris would say, or 80-85% finished, still but a little bit firmness, a little bit of firmness to the rice. Then you can take that and put it in your collection box, put it out, and collect the fungi on that collection. You're going to put the rice into your basket. Now, here in Thailand, we found that the baskets that are more open like that work much better. They're also like 75 cents each. So we found that the collections with those tend to be much less trichoderma dominant. We're just getting much better results with this. So that's the direction we're going now. And then we just go ahead and cut a little piece of screen. And we put zip ties on that to work like a little hinge. And then we also go ahead and take a couple pieces of one of the other differences, I guess, from the other methodologies, is something that Chris mentioned trying, and we've had a lot better luck with this too, in terms of sometimes when it's a little bit drier, we tend to get more trichoderma collections with the IMO. And to kind of get around that problem, we're actually taking and looking around and trying to collect some of the different fungi and mycelium, sticking it right on top of the, just dropping it in underneath the screen directly on top of the rice, so it can colonize it a little bit quicker and help, reduce some of the trichoderma stuff, especially when it's a little wetter and then dry right afterwards. It seems like there's a bit of like an airborne bloom of the trichoderma that seems to cause a little bit more. You also want to make sure you cover it from the rain, as you can see here in the picture. We just use like a little trash bag and a couple pieces of bamboo or whatever, just to keep it up. So this is what it'll look like when you get a good collection. As you can see, there's a couple leaves and sticks that we threw on top that had fungi on it. You can see everything's completely, engulfed. This will come out like a cake, right? It'll be one piece. It shouldn't be crumbly or anything like that. And then inside, you can see here the fungi that's feeding on the insects. You can see this one's hollowed out the whole thing on the inside, but the one that's feeding more on the insect, you can see is that more darker yellow fungi. So your colors will be a little bit more varied. It won't be just that all bright white with the insect collections. You'll have a little bit more yellow and a little bit more, orange and things like that. But you shouldn't have lots of greens, just like you would for regular IMO collections. You don't want it overly green dominant because that's trichoderma. Now, if you have a major root fungal problem, you can actually isolate and collect the trichoderma, put that on some more rice, which I also have a video on my YouTube channel, and then actually just propagate the trichoderma to treat like root fungal outbreaks or something like that, which works really well. But you don't want to, in general, use that for your IMO. So next up, we're going to take that IMO chunks, break them down. As you can see here, again, like we we're talking about, it should be a thick fungal cake. It shouldn't be crumbly. It shouldn't be overly wet. It shouldn't smell bad. It should, the insect ones don't always smell the best, but it shouldn't smell rotten or like a fermented cricket or insect or anything like that. Then you're going to mix that all, weigh it, and mix it again 50% with sugar. And then go ahead and put an additional sugar cap on it, because we've noticed, especially with the IPMO, it tends to kind of rise a little bit at first, and then it'll kind of drop back down. And if you have that sugar layer on top, it keeps that oxygen cap on there. So it seems to work a little bit better by doing it with that method, particularly with the IPMO. Again, I have a whole 20-minute video just on this, where we go step by step through on my YouTube channel if you want to learn more about it. If you want to know the SOPs for it, I thought I'd throw that on here. I'm not going to sit here and read through this all for you guys, but you guys can go back to this video and use it as a reference for yourselves, so that you can go ahead and make it for yourself. And then if you want to do the IPMO 3 and 4, you can check the version out on here as well. Again, just want to kind of get this out so that everybody can kind of get the word out on it. I think it's a cool new method that can work anywhere in the world. I've used it all over the place, everywhere from Africa to Zimbabwe to now Thailand. And yeah, it's great. So check it out. Again, it's too much to read through. All right, so yes, last part. Thought there was only 2 parts, there's 3. But you can just do the quick and dirty, so that if you just are in a rush, you have bugs, need to treat them right now, this version works pretty well. This is the version that we use the most. It's just the quick and dirty IMO 2 version. But if you do want to take it to an IMO 3 or 4, we do have all of those instructions available here in the presentation. One word of caution, don't spray bees. This is what happens when you spray the bees. Don't do that. Don't do what I did.
Jumbi spray.
Yeah. Bad juju for the bees. So with liquid IMO, one thing I wanted to mention is the liquid IPMO is you want to go about a cup. You can go a little heavy if you want to go over cup per 4 to 4 gallons, 4.5 gallons, and then brew that up in your bucket. You can also use IPMO 3 or 4, which we have instructions for in the previous couple of slides. 1 tablespoon of humic acid, and then also make sure you do an extra cup of vermicompost as well. Chris turned me on to that recently, and it seems to work a little bit better. Also under the microscope, it definitely is more biodiverse. So definitely something to think about when you're doing your IPMO additions, just to get that little extra diversity. I do see there's a couple questions in chat. We'll get to that at the end of the presentation. All right, so the experimental version that I've been working on here in Thailand is, and this came from, I was looking at my beta. I have a beta sits on my desk. She's super cool. She's a koi beta. I found at the street market the other day. Anyways, I feed her ants. So sometimes the ants get into the dog food or whatever outside. So I'll just go and scoop a bunch of them up into a cup, throw them in the freezer, and then feed them to her just to give her a treat. And some of the ants fell down to the bottom and got moldy. So I thought, I wonder if that's like any kind of effective towards, if that solely is just to break them down, if it's a saprophytic fungi, or if there's any more to it. So took some of that, look under the microscope, looked pretty interesting. So took a regular jar and just made a bunch of it, and it just with a bunch of ants and just regular old, distilled water we got here. Dechlorinated water can also work. And then threw them in there and just let them, grow the fungi on them after 3 or 4 days. Threw an air stone in it for about an hour just to stir it all up to get the fungi all broken up into little chunks. Put that into a spray bottle and then sprayed a couple of beetles, a couple of grasshoppers, a couple of ants that we have in little, mason jars basically, but enough, as little plants and stuff in there to keep them alive long enough to test them. And it seems to work really well against the ants and the beetles so far. It hasn't touched the grasshoppers, which is interesting, but it's something else to try. So if you want something else to experiment with, you want a new idea to try out, it's not very difficult. It's very low tech and very easy to do as long as you can collect some local insects in your area. And again, this is something you'd have to actually collect your live local insects. You wouldn't want to do this from this version, I don't think, from frass or anything like that. I think you really do want to get the actual insect collection. So definitely something else to try. And again, early test results come back with ants and beetles being affected. But again, we're going to keep tinkering with this and trial some more stuff here. And we have a bunch of stuff we're going to do with the IPMO as far as trialing it on rice fields this year, and some other cool stuff here in Thailand. So we're not just focused on cannabis when it comes to developing some of the stuff. We're also looking at helping some of the local farmers and also test bedding it directly against traditional pesticides, which, hey, if we can prove that it works just as good, that'd be pretty game changing for a lot of things. So it's definitely something I'm really excited to work on this year. If you want this, there's the protocol for that. You can check that out. Screenshot it, whatever you want to do. Just make sure if you reuse it for anything, just give proper credit for that one. Make sure you give Chris credit too if you're talking about IPMO. It's kind of his invention. He had weevils get into one of his IMO 3 batches, and they grew like little popcorn balls. And sorry, the dogs are singing. They grew into little popcorn balls, and that ended up being able to those little popcorn balls turned into being little fungi, similar like Bavaria bassiana or something like that. So he was able to realize that was going on, and then kind of develop that from there. So shout out to Chris Trump for that and all of the awesome education. And he's actually be on the conference tomorrow. So other IMO ideas to try. So someone recommended to me earlier this year, and we've been kind of tinkering this a couple of times with using things like coconut water for your rice instead of regular water for cooking the rice, to infuse it with more amino acids and other things to help get better collections from your IMO. Definitely something interesting to try. You can also try adding things like kelp or humic acid or powdered aloe. Things like that can also help increase some of the diversity from your collections. Plant ferments as well. So you can also take your liquid IMO and then basically do like a jadam kind of FPJ kind of thing. Basically, you take liquid IMO and you add a bunch of plant material to it. I have a different presentation on this, which I don't know. We do have slides on this later on. Sorry. I had to make 3 different slides decks this week, so it's been a fun week. Regardless, the plant ferments you want to take and you're basically just creating a concentrate. So once you melt those plants in the liquid IMO, you're continually adding more and more and more. It works particularly good with bananas, banana trees, squash, anything that's larger, vinier, has a lot of that tissue. It works really, really well with in terms of potassium levels and other things. So definitely another great idea to try, and it can add another tool to your mineralization toolbox when it comes to organic inputs. And then aquatic IMOs, which we've talked about last year in the presentation on this conference. Super Labs. This is one of my favorite products, and this can really help accelerate plant growth and also help you recover from like damage from insects or weather or whatever else. And this is basically taking labs and then putting spirulina and kelp into it in order to utilize the lactobacillus to break down those and isolate the hormones and valuable compounds like phycocyanin and other important plant growth compounds. As you can see here, when you do it properly, it is a brilliant blue. Yeah, you'll know immediately if you get it right because the color. But basically, you're going to take this, skim off the curds or the cheese off the top, and then below that will be a thinner blue layer, a neon blue layer. That's your Super Labs. That's the concentrate that you want to utilize as a foliar spray or a root drench in order to help heal damaged plants, repair plants that have been heavily damaged by insects, or even plants that haven't been watered. I know we used it on peppers that hadn't been watered in quite a few weeks, and they had new branches coming into every dead leaf node, and the plant was so dead the leaves were like paper off of this little pepper plant that hadn't been watered in 3 weeks. So it does really amazing things when it comes to not only accelerating growth rate as an organic PGR that you can make at home, but also healing plants when you have a catastrophe. Here's the recipe for that. If you want to utilize that at home, give it a whirl. Again, it's too long to read through, just like the others, but you guys have it now if you want to play with it. So Plant Labs. So just like we talked about with the spirulina, you can actually utilize lactobacillus in a similar manner to things like FPJ to isolate the different nutrients from plant material. So One of the ones that I like a lot is doing things like stinging nettle or horsetail, which are both super high in silica. Stinging nettle is also really high in things like manganese and molybdenum and other trace minerals, copper, zinc. Just be mindful, it also can be, both of those can be high in things like heavy metals. So just be careful that you're getting them from clean and good sources when you are growing them, and utilize them as compost or liquid fermentation for your garden. There's lots of great products out now based on comfrey and purslane and cannabis and all types of things. You can also, grow all those. Beets and radishes are another great one. The leftover parts of that that you don't eat from those, it can be a great, again, another great ferment. If you have an area that has a lot of really, hard soil, you can grow lots of beets and things like that, bust up the soil and then ferment them and put that nutrients right back into the soil as well. So it can be a great way to recycle all that stuff in a way that kind of gives you another tool in your KNF toolbox in terms of breaking things down. And if you want the recipe for that and some ideas on that, and again, feel free to modify and change any of this. If this isn't working for you, you need to change a ratio or something, go for it. Like, I think a KNF oftentimes is taught as this rigid structure, and to me, it's like a machine where I put plant material in on this side, and then I get nutrients and fertilizer out the other side, and microbial mixes or whatever else. So you tinkering with it and playing with it and changing it up. I also like adding kefir grains to my lactobacillus and things like that as well. So definitely a different direction that you can go in if you're looking to diversify your KNF inputs. All right. Sorry about that. I need a drink there. So fermented plant IMO. So this is what I was talking about before. And this was developed by a gentleman that I'm hopefully going to get a chance to visit here in the next couple of months, named Quoc Con Pham in Vietnam, who's a hop, skip, and a jump from where I am right now. He basically came up with this method, and basically he noticed that when he takes plant material and puts it in a ratio of 1 to 20, so 20 parts liquid IMO to 1 part plant material, to as high as 5 to 20 ratio plant material to liquid IMO in a giant barrel, and then every month or so added more and more and more plant material. After 90 days, there was a significant increase in potassium, calcium, and iron levels, and they were able to get total ppm levels in those nutrients that were completely organic from just liquid fermentation, that were as high as the same stuff that's available from like hydroponic nutrients or store-bought liquid nutrients. So this can again offer another solution that's hyper concentrated, so that you can have those quick reaction solutions. It's kind of like a weird hybrid of Jadam and KNF, but it certainly works well. We're working on that right now with bananas and cannabis, doing liquid IMO fermentations and regular FPJs. Again, we have currently over 4,000 plants, so we have tons and tons and tons of leaves every day that we have to work with, to play with and ferment and things like that. So we're going to be utilizing all of that to put nutrients back into our plants and back into our systems. And here's the recipe for that. You can give that a whirl. Definitely check it out. And again, a big thank you to Quan Con Pham for that one. He's currently working on shrimp and prawns, I think, right now in Vietnam. I know he's working on some cool stuff with that. For nutrient testing, so if you want to test your different inputs for your liquid Jadams, fertilizers, whatever else, Hannah is a great one, because Hannah has lots of non-color based systems. So if you have color blindness or partial color blindness, which is a large percentage of the population, Hannah has really good tester units for that have digital number readouts. Aquarium Pharmaceuticals has pretty cheap options. Lamotte has lots and lots and lots of different tests that are high quality. And you can find all these different things over at aptestkit.com. It has a link over to the page over at opennutrient.com, as well as the Excel sheet if you want to download that for offline use. That has all the different nutrient ranges and all the different things. But you can utilize all these different liquid test kits to test all of your FPJs, your ferments, your lactobacillus stuff, so that you actually have an idea of what your nutrient ratios are in your own what you're creating, right? I know people are very skilled and adept at creating these different inputs. I know so many wonderful people that listen to the show every week are always telling me about new things that they're working on. Well, a lot, very few of them have had a chance to quantify the nutrients on them. And I think that if we can just get the info out on how to do this cheaply, I think we can start to get people to kind of crowdsource the solutions to a lot of this stuff, and we can start to understand a lot more of what the nutrient side of a lot of these imports are. Because too much, I think people kind of are averse to talking about the nutrient ranges with, especially the natural farming stuff. So one of the main reasons I want to mention this is we've seen certain farms with up to 4x the legal limit of heavy metals, mainly for arsenic, in certain aquaponic systems where they just had someone that was a little too focused on the organic side and not on the chemistry side. And this is definitely something that people need to think about. And this is the type of thing that happens when you utilize things like kelp plus iron as your only iron input, and you're dosing that heavily every week. Um, you know, you're going to end up completely overdosing your arsenic. Now, the main thing that we've seen with the arsenic is it seems almost always to be with extremely heavy overdosing of kelp extracts or rock phosphate. If you go completely insane with your dosing and totally overboard, you can absolutely fail for arsenic. But you can do the same thing in soil too. I know soil people that have also failed for arsenic for overdoing it with kelp. So just a word of caution with something that we have seen with some of my clients that we took over from other people in Oklahoma was, that was the reason why we took them over. So you can check that out, and just kind of a word of caution on that. So if you want a good database on how to find nutrient values for the plants in your local home, the local area, you can check that out here at Duke's database over at the Phytochem and ethnobotanical databases. Lots of great info on there. But if you want to find out all the different nutrients for specific groups, like all the potassium ones that are the best, all this by average nutrient content, we've actually taken it and broken down a lot of that data over at opennutrientproject.com. I've put together a huge database of that, but not only Duke's database, but many other sources that you can find right there on the webpage. Each single link has a link directly back to either the original database or the link directly back to the page that it came from. So you can find all the source material if you think anything is inaccurate or anything like that. So check it out. It's basically to try and make that a lot simpler to navigate and a lot easier for people to utilize and use on their own, and be able to kind of, again, better understand the nutrient values of these ferments and composts and teas. By making an open source database like this, it doesn't matter if you're a compost person or you're an aquaponics person or you're a Jadam person or a KNF person. This is valuable information regardless of what you're doing for any of those, in a format that's a little easier to quickly digest if you don't have a really deep background on this. So definitely something to check out. And this is available for free at opennutrientproject.com. or potentponics.com. Just click on Open Nutrient Project. We also have there we go. We also have the testing databases available on there as well, with all the different liquid test kits. We also are adding soil test kits on there as well. We're adding more and more of those all the time, as well as commercial resources and links for how to find commercial testing. If you're looking for product testing, Oregon's Department of Agriculture product database can be found at the link there. And the Cannabis Horticultural Association resource page also has a ton of great info on, chemical analysis of different inputs and different things. So definitely a great way for you to, better understand what's in the products that you're utilizing in your garden. Another thing too for testing, if you're looking for virus testing and other disease testing, agdia.com is really good, as well as medicinal genomics. Kevin McKern will actually be speaking on viruses later today, so definitely check him out. But both of those are great resources if you're looking to find out what's going on in your garden. And then you can find out more on me from the Growing with Fishes podcast. We have over 800 hours of educational content. We're available on all the different platforms: Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcast, iTunes, Amazon Music, SoundCloud, all the things. And we have an amazing back catalog of interviews from people from all over the planet. So definitely check that out. We have the Aquaponic Cannabis class, which you guys can check out as well. Marty and I co-founded the Growing with Fishes podcast, as well as this conference. Marty will be with us a little later today. He's currently tending the munchkins, and but he will be with us later this afternoon. You can check that out at apmjclass.com or aquaponic-cannabis.teachable.com. You can use coupon code AP23 and save $75 off the class if you're watching this. And yeah, so check that out. We do add new content to that. Any of the classes that I have through any of my platforms, we add new content to that every few months. We have a ton of new KNF content, especially around pest management for in high humidity climates like Thailand going up in this next month or two. So definitely check it out. It's kind of an ever-growing database. Check that out. Add new content to that. Any of the classes that I have for any of my platforms, we add new content to that every few months. We have a ton of. Thank you. All right. And you guys can find me at Potent Ponics on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, all the things. There's my email. There's the pest class, the nutrient class, all the other things. And we also have a wonderful Facebook group, Aquaponic Cannabis Growers. So check that out if you aren't available or aware of that already. And yeah, we'll take the last 10 minutes to answer questions. Yeah, thanks everybody. This was, sorry, a little discombobulated today with all the technical issues this morning, but I think everything is on the right track now. What questions do we have here in chat? Oh, let me go back through here. Sorry about that. Oh, do you have it in a list?
Go to the go to the meeting chat. Yeah, I put all the questions in there so we wouldn't miss anybody as they're coming up. I got them up anyways. Cannaman, the first Cannaman asked, do you have any experience tips for collecting IMO in the winter, or have any suggestions?
1 second. I can't get screen share to stop. It's like interesting problem. Anyways, yeah, shucks, this is an interesting technical issue. Zoom, the new Zoom, man, is such a mess right now. There we go. There we go. Cool. I have control of my computer back. Now I can read the questions. All right. Isn't Korean natural farming more about microbial life and not nutrient content? That's kind of the misconception that I'm trying to like put out here at this point. Like, to ignore the mineral content of all of the inputs that you're creating when now we have the ability to analyze it is kind of silly. In fact, if you go to the Open Nutrient Project page, we have all those test kits on there so that you can analyze your natural farming inputs. We also have a submission page on there, so you can submit your nutrient results. And then we have a full open source database of what other people have found nutrient wise with their tests. The idea is to crowdsource all of the different nutrient content from people's own personal farm data to create an open source database of what is the nutrient content when I create an FPJ with this particular plant in this general region. Because I think people are just ignoring all the ppms of nutrients in there for no reason, and it just doesn't make any sense. Like, from a chemistry standpoint, it just seems bonkers to me, and I don't understand. Like, again, it goes back to kind of like the religion of not religion, but like the I don't know any other way to put it. Like
there's some people that take it way too seriously. Like, you have to. It's by the book. All with them, they follow the book to the T, and yeah, I've learned over time that it's a toolbox that you are able to implement in different ways to your grow. It's based.
Yeah, I'm not even the only one that's doing this type of mapping or trying to get this going right now. I know Nigel Palmer is another natural farming expert, has some great books. In fact, I have one of his books right here. I just got anyways, it's called The Regenerative Grower's Guide to Garden Amendments. It's a really good book, but he's a big fan of mapping, and he has a whole database on his website as well of different nutrient values for different ferments and KNF inputs that he's done. So again, I think that there's kind of this weird misnomer that it's not about the nutrients because they didn't have an easy way to quantify it before. But we have an easy way to quantify it now. So there's no real reason why we shouldn't understand what's going on and what we're doing in the garden. There's just no reason to not do that. Using keef from milk aisle help. Yeah, keef is really good. It'll help diversify your lactobacillus and it'll make it a little more aggressive. When you have kefir in it, especially when you're using it for powdery mildew applications, it seems to be much more aggressive at treating the powdery mildew. Question about collecting bugs for IPMO. I can get kids to collect grasshoppers for me, but how do I kill the grasshoppers once I have them? Just toss them in a Ziploc and throw them in the freezer, for an hour and they're dead. That's the simplest way. Same with caterpillars. What's the best way to kill them? Again, throw them all in a Ziploc, toss them in the freezer, come back in 2 hours, hour or two, you're good to go. You can feel good that they were asleep. Didn't die horribly. Do you have any experience tips collecting IMO in the winter? You can do it. One thing I would say is that you need to add more time. Like it's not going to be a 5-day collection. And you do need to kind of do it when there's a little bit of a warm spell. Like you're not going to do it below 32 degrees. And you're probably not going to get a good collection below about 40 degrees Fahrenheit. You can do it, but it's going to be like a 10-day, 14-day collection, not a 5-day. Keep that in mind. And then I'd also be more on the seeding it, putting those sticks and stuff like we talked about directly on top of the rice. What other questions do we have here? We got a few more minutes left. Sorry, I'm just now
Mind if I chime in on that one a little bit? I've also heard of people burying them into the ground, so you get that 12°C from the ground. So it is obviously not the best collection, but you may be able to get your collection to happen a little quicker that way by burying them into the ground. I've seen people put their rice into socks and actually bury the sock below the surface and then dig it up at a later time.
Cool. We had a gecko fight going on here next to me. Anyways, yeah, looks like everyone's checking their connection and everything. What else do we have here as far as questions? I know I saw a couple about the IPMO earlier. Was this
Green Goddess, question about collecting. Oh wait, no, you already did that. Sorry. There's one from
the chirping on the mic. If you can hear it, is the geckos. Gotta get them more stoned. It's a problem.
Did you do the dirty growers question there? I have one. Can using kefir from the milk aisle help? I guess he's talking about
yeah,
making.
we touched on that one.
Okay, sorry.
We're good. If anyone else has any questions in chat, go ahead and throw them in now. We have a few more minutes before the next guest.
Can you finish? Gingerbug just asked, can you finish collections indoor too? I don't think you could finish a collection indoor. You could maybe get it to bloom a little more indoor, but I don't think you'd be collecting anything there.
Yeah, you could do it. So one of the other methods that I've heard people do is put like it in like the pantyhose method, where you kind of bury it below the substrate, and go about it that way. And then just like you were talking about, getting it kind of below the frost line. That might be a way to kind of get some stuff, or just in a warm mulch pile or leaf pile or some other thing like that. That might be another option for collecting it, or maybe even just go with collecting some leaf mold that you can find and then trying to culture it indoors. Like put the leaf mold into an IMO box in your garage where it's like warm but not hot. That might be another great way to try and get some
Yep.
kind of play. Again, it's not going to be as good as the forest one, but if it's that or nothing, that's certainly going to be better than anything else. That's for sure.
100%.
I hope you guys have got a bunch out of that, and I wanted to make sure you guys had some stuff that you could kind of take with you and go play with, right? Like, and let me know how it works out. You know, give Chris some love if you do the IPMO stuff, and let us know what results you're finding with that, and if you adjust anything, let us know what's working for you, because I think this could be a really great method for everyone to do that. I know we touched on it last year, but now we've got a lot, you know, a lot more experience using it at scale, especially commercial scale now. So it's also made our plants completely, and we don't have a single mold issue or septoria problem in our garden. And I know quite a few people in the area that are having septoria issues right now. So when the input nutrient values of KNF plants vary due to the fertility, exactly, and the area and the type of plant, all those types of things. This is why we need to crowdsource this, because it's more data than anybody could ever put together, or any university. This is something that we need to work on as a community. That can be a great resource and tool for everyone to utilize, regardless of what your tribe is of organic growing. Alrighty.
Please support these companies. They took the time to educate us during this conference. If you're looking for more education on aquaponic cannabis, please consider the Aquaponic Cannabis Masterclass at apmjclass.com, featuring over 7 days of in-depth, hands-on educational content with Marty Waddell and Stephen Reisner as your guides through the aquaponic cannabis universe. We'll cover everything from construction of large commercial facilities, home-sized systems, backyard systems, nutrients, pest control, diseases, everything you can think of, and so much more. So be sure to check that out at apmjclass.com. And if you're looking for aquaponic cannabis or living soil pest control courses, please check out thepestclass.com, where we have a huge in-depth course on pest control, how to make your own biocontrols, as well as in-depth guides and identification guides for a whole slew of different pests that you might encounter in your aquaponics garden. And it's not strictly just geared towards cannabis, it's also geared towards vegetables as well. So be sure to check that out if it's something you think you might need to improve in your education.